Motherhood is wonderful, yet, as any mom can tell you, it's not always sunshine, roses, and smiles. From the dark lows of postpartum depression to the bright joys of cuddle time and first steps, being a new mom can be, all at once, scary, stressful, and full of delight. When we add issues such as prenatal depression, postpartum depression, sleepless nights, and societal pressures to the mix, the journey of motherhood can become truly challenging. Whether a woman is having her first child or her fifth, wisdom tells us that what moms need most is kindness, empathy, and loving support. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real life question. I suffered from severe prenatal and postpartum depression with our first child. It was the worst period of my life. Now that our son is 3 and I'm finding such happiness in being a mom, my husband and I are ready for another child. I'm excited, but also really scared and anxious. Do you have any tips for us? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Tracy Gold, who will be talking with us about her experience with prenatal depression, sleep, the societal pressures of motherhood, and the supportive light that can be found in one's own mother. Welcome to the podcast, Tracy. It's such a joy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you're an author on
Yes.
motherhood, one that's already in print. Everybody's
Mhm.
sleeping but the baby. I love that book. And we have one coming out in just a moment. And that one, tell us the title.
That's Call Your Mother. And I wrote that one thinking about how my own mom really helped me, not just when I was a kid, but very importantly when I became a mother myself, and how that really changed our relationship in a special way.
And I want to dive into that a little bit more, or maybe a lot more as we proceed. But can you tell our listeners a little bit about what makes you you?
Yeah, what makes me me? Well, we chatted a little bit. I love horses. I love my family and picture books. I started writing when I had my child. She's 5 now, and I've been writing my whole life. And I work as an editor when I'm not writing. And picture books have just been this wonderful way to connect with kids and families and explore some of my own struggles with the 2 books that you mentioned, in a lighthearted way.
Well, thank you for that background. And let's talk a little bit. Let's dive into some of those challenges of motherhood
Mhm,
and looking at this listener's question, the prenatal depression, postpartum depression, which so many mothers suffer
mhm,
from, and many mothers feel really terrible. I've worked with mothers who have suffered from prenatal and postpartum depression, and they
mhm.
feel not only overwhelmed and scared and deeply sad, but also they feel like they're broken because
Right.
this joy of motherhood is supposed to be delightful and wonderful and happy, and but it's often, especially at first, it's
Mhm,
especially if you've suffered from prenatal and or postpartum depression,
mhm.
it can actually be quite a difficult road.
Yeah. I The question said, it was the most difficult time in my life, and that's something I absolutely identify with. My pregnancy was horrible. I had hyperemesis it's been 5 years, I can't pronounce these things anymore. Hyperemesis gravidarum, so I was just sick all day, every day for months, and there's this question, am I depressed because I'm sick? Am I sick because I'm depressed? And it was horrible. It was horrible, and did make it harder to adjust once she was there also. So, I would be interested to hear from you, what are some of your tips that you're giving to your patients? I know for me, I mean, we talked about horses. Getting back into horses is one thing that helps me find my identity again. That really helps me. And I know that I've heard that from a lot of my friends, whether it's horses or tennis or art or whatever it is, a lot of women I know who are very career focused, perhaps before pregnancy, still are involved in their careers, but have actually had this driving need to reconnect to some of these passions that they have in their life to reclaim their identities after they become mothers.
Absolutely, you have hit on some of my biggest tips for new moms or moms who
Yeah.
are, in the prenatal period. It is that place where it's so important to realize that being a mom or a mom to be is one part of your
Mhm.
identity, just one part. And
Mhm.
the other parts deserve to be
Right.
nourished and cared for. And
Yeah.
that for everyone, and we will be talking more about the societal pressures, but
Mhm.
so many new moms or moms to be are trying to do it all. They're trying to be
Right.
it all. And the truth is, some women breeze through pregnancy. It is
Mhm.
they love being
Mhm.
pregnant. They
Right.
adore it. They just
I don't
are doing better.
understand.
I don't either. And other moms are really suffering,
Yes.
where every
Yeah.
day is a challenge and
Mhm.
it's very, very difficult. And it doesn't make it that you're a bad person or that you're
Right.
doing it wrong. It's simply that your body is going
Yes.
through a huge adjustment, and not just your body, your
Absolutely.
mind, your spirit, your emotional world,
Yeah.
everything is being affected not just by all of you know, the physiological changes. Your entire makeup is changing when you're a
Yes.
mom, and all of the neurochemicals that are ebbing and flowing,
Right.
and how we really want it. One of the biggest pieces is normalizing that
Mhm.
this is a part of some women's pregnancy
Right.
journey, and you don't have to be different. You don't have to look like the neighbor next door or the woman in the
Right.
support group. Every woman is going to have her journey, and you get to make the most of that and embrace
Right.
it for what it is, rather than adding the burden of comparing yourself to someone on Instagram or down the street or
Right.
in a magazine. Motherhood looks different for every woman.
I remember a conversation that I had with a group of new moms, a casual conversation. And one mom goes, "Don't you just love being a mom?" And at that point, I don't think I'd slept more than 4 hours. I was constantly covered in spit up. I was like, "No, I don't love it." I felt like so much shame. Um, and I would still say, I do love being a mom now more and more every year. And then maybe we'll see what happens when she's a teenager because I hear that's really hard. But those baby stages, I was like, I struggled so much with that. And it helped me to find other people who were struggling, and you absolutely, I mean, for me, I know not everybody feels this way when they have a baby. I did have a very strong connection. I very much loved my kid, but did I love waking up every 2 hours and being stressed about how much milk I was producing and having someone scream if I left the room? No, I didn't love those parts of it. And it felt very scary to admit that.
And good for you to be so in touch with that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to gently ask you about the shame piece.
Yeah.
It's so important to look at that, how there is that potential for deep
Right.
shame when we feel as if we are not just imperfect as mothers, maybe we can embrace that. Okay, I'm an imperfect mom. But when we are downright disliking, maybe even sometimes hating that
Yeah.
journey of motherhood,
Yeah.
it can feel, I can see
Mhm.
that's shame inducing
Right.
if we really go into that
Yeah.
space. Say
Yeah.
more, please.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, I think it was hard for me to identify who were the safe people for me to talk to about that. Now I feel like pretty open about it, right? But at that time, I was worried, like, is there something wrong with me? Like, am I going to mess up my child because I'm not feeling a certain way about all of this? And I just kind of like dipped my toes in the water, talking to a few friends who I struggled with about my struggles. And I did have a lot of doctor's appointments at that time. I wish I had worked harder to make time to go to therapy. Um, at that time, I was just it's so hard to make time to take care of yourself when you are whether you're working or you're not working. It is, for me, it was very much survival mode. Um, when really, really until I slept, until she was until she was sleeping the night through, I just felt like I was treading water just to keep my head above water. And I think that, as more of my friends became pregnant, and I was one of the first of my friends to have a kid, which was hard. Um, it was hard for me because I didn't know what was normal. I'd never changed a diaper before I became a mom.
Mm.
I'd never had. Um,
No nieces, no nephews there to learn to
no,
okay.
no, yeah, and then my wonderful sister-in-law had actually worked in the NICU, so she got it right in there. She knew what she was doing, but I was like, I don't know. And there was poop and pee everywhere all the time. And,
So much new.
there are better ways to change diapers than others, right? You have to have your, like, little backup systems going on. Um, yeah, it was really overwhelming for me. But I did find those friends and seeing new friends become pregnant, I had this almost a sense of urgency that if I didn't talk about how hard it was for me, that they might end up feeling alone if they felt that way. And I didn't want them to feel alone. So that kind of helped me think about it. Um, yeah, and
Thank you for
I did have a couple friends who I was able to talk to, and that was really a lifeboat for me.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing those pieces because I don't want them to get lost. Each one is so important.
Yeah.
The piece of having safe people to talk
Right.
to, whether it's a
Right.
friend, a sister, a minister, an
Right.
OBGYN, a
A therapist.
psychologist,
Yeah.
yeah, having someone to talk to
Mhm.
who is safe,
Mhm.
non-judgmental, open. I also have to say how beautiful of you to really want to pave the way for your friends to realize, hey, I hope this is a great journey for you. But if it's
Right.
not, know that you're not defective.
Right.
This is something that happens to some
Yeah.
people. It happens.
I think the only people I know who feel like they had a really great journey are people who had really good sleepers, whose babies were good at sleeping. Those are the people I feel like that it was the easiest for, at least from the outside looking in, right? Because you never know what's happening inside someone else's family.
Well, and it's good that you realize it. It might
Yeah,
look different on the inside
yeah,
of, inside of that front door to that home,
right,
but also how important it is when we can get good sleep because
mm,
research shows that when we're deprived of sleep,
right,
even for several hours, the brain can experience that as
absolutely.
being deprived of sleep for several days. And it's hard for us
Yes,
to realize
yeah,
that
yeah.
just 3 hours, 4 hours of sleep deprivation,
Mm,
it's as though you haven't slept for days.
right,
And when we aren't sleeping well, then we're more prone to feeling sad,
right.
irritable, depressed. all of those
Yeah.
things that creates that vicious cycle. As you were saying earlier on, you didn't know if you were depressed because of everything that was going on, or if everything that was
Right.
going on was part of being depressed, or if it was just part of
Right.
the whole circle that
And
happens.
hormones, all the
Oh my goodness, the
hormones.
hormones.
Yeah. Yeah.
And going back to the part on shame, I want to pause there because we often don't talk about shame
Mm,
in being a human being, much less in the journey of motherhood.
mhm,
And many people confuse shame with embarrassment.
mm,
And just pausing to distinguish those two. Embarrassment is when we do something in public and we go, oops, I made a faux pas in front of these other people. So
right.
it's generally something in society.
Like
But
when your baby poops all over you in
when your
public,
baby
then
poops all over you,
maybe you're
or
embarrassed.
yes, or the cans of juice go flying all over the
Yes.
parking lot, we might be a little
Yes.
embarrassed, but shame is so much
Mhm.
more destructive, because in situations like this, because it brings up this sense of I am flawed.
Mm,
This human being, I am broken. There is something about me that is wrong,
right.
that is not right, that is not okay. And when we think about that difference between shame and embarrassment, and looking at a mom who is so full of hope and dreams, and then to be, whether it's during the prenatal journey and you're thinking, I'm not enjoying this.
Mhm.
What is this supposed to be, that everyone says, oh my God, this is the best time of my life? So
Right.
even that part, and being depressed and sad and simply uncomfortable, because being pregnant, I
Mm.
know it's really uncomfortable. At least for me, it was like terribly uncomfortable. It's like, ugh. Anyway,
Oh,
so when you go from that to now babies in the world,
right.
and then you feel ashamed because, as you said, you're leaving the room and baby's crying.
Mhm.
You don't have experience in changing diapers. You've never had a baby
Right.
before. You didn't have nieces and nephews to experiment on.
Right.
So everything is new. You've been thrust into this new job.
Right.
No prep, no training.
Right.
You can read it, but just like any job, if you read
Right.
about it and that you weren't coached on it, you didn't have prior experience. So now you're in a new job and you feel like you're failing. Is that what was
Right.
happening?
Yeah, I think, you're like, "Can I really do this job?" There's this worry, and there's also, like, you're stuck. You don't have a choice, you have to do the
You
job.
can't give it back and you can't resign.
You know? Uh,
That's
which
a
I'm
good point.
laughing, but it's actually, and I think for a lot of women, when they're pregnant, that can feed into a lot of prenatal depression and anxiety, like, "What have I gotten myself into?" Even when it's, a highly desired child. I've I've had friends have feelings like that, and very, like, grateful that they feel comfortable discussing that with me. But certainly that's something that I felt during my pregnancy, like, oh my gosh, I did not know what I was signing up for. But here I am, and this train isn't stopping and it's not turning back. um, and it was something that I wanted. Um, but yeah, it's just, I feel like I've gotten off of shame. So for you, like, what is your definition of shame? I'm kind of curious about that.
The way I look at shame as a clinician is
Mhm.
that sense that I am bad.
Interesting.
I am not acceptable. I am not
Right.
worthy. And shame, the reason I see it as something that's so toxic, it is the underpinning of so many mental health issues,
Hmm.
from substance abuse to
Hmm.
um, s- uh, it's often at the roots of some trauma. It's
Mm.
often at the roots of dysfunction in interpersonal relationships, because if you feel like you are a shameful person, you are full of shame,
Hmm.
that you are deeply, deeply bad, insufficient, unworthy, that's going to come out in a lot of
Interesting.
ways that aren't going to be healthy for interpersonal relationships. And when we take it back to motherhood, if we become even a little bit filled with shame, like
Mm.
I I don't it's different from I don't know how to do this. It becomes more of I am no good at this, and
Yes.
everybody else is good at this, and
Right.
there's something wrong with me as a human being because
Right.
I'm not enjoying this journey. It's downright awful, and I want out.
Right. And then am I a bad mom for feeling this way? And am I
Mhm.
doomed to be a bad mom, forever? Like I mean, I think that that was absolutely something that I worried about. And every time I lose my temper, I still feel like, oh no, I'm such a bad mom. It's like it's okay. I I'm coping with that and I'll show her how you deal with it. I'll show my daughter how you deal with it when you lose your temper and you make a mistake. It's okay. But I do have all of those feelings and I think that's very common, to feel
It's
like
so common,
uh
and though part of a journey of being a human being is realizing we want to not lose our temper with our kids. We definitely
mhm,
don't want to lose our temper really with other people. We want to learn emotional regulation,
right.
and so easy to say, right? So easy to say, "Oh, just be emotionally
Right.
regulated." Yet, when you're under the old term HALT, HALT, if you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired,
Mm,
and I added an S onto that in my forthcoming book, The Joy of Imperfect Love, for
mhm.
stressed. When we are
Yeah.
hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or
Mm,
stressed, we
interesting.
are going to be more prone to emotional dysregulation. We
Interesting.
will snap, we
Right.
will, and the best we can do is is get our sleep, eat right,
Mhm.
have good boundaries, good self-care, and all of these things aren't easily accessible for a new mom. They're often
Yeah.
not. If you have a tremendous support system and people coming in who are helping with baby, a
Right.
grandma, something like that, the journey can be a lot easier if you have a really supportive partner. But a
Right.
lot of people don't have those blessings. And I
Mhm.
was fortunate, I know, that I had an angel in my life at that time, a
Mhm.
human being who would come in, and she supported me in being a mom, in
Mm.
learning all of those things. And I do have to say that was a deal breaker for me. I mean, not
Mhm.
having that, my journey would have been a lot different.
Right.
But if you have at least one person who's coming in who is an angel in your life, a
Right.
sister, a mom,
Yeah.
some people have au pairs, that sort of thing,
Right.
nannies. But if you have someone, even a babysitter who can come in a couple times a
Right.
week just to give you a bit of relief,
Yes.
because without that self-care, you don't have time to sleep, to replenish yourself. And I can tell from, your eyes and from things you've said, you just didn't get that.
I had a lot of help from my mom, and that absolutely got me through a lot of problems that I had. But she also had, different views on what a woman's role should be in taking care of a child. And she didn't always help with the shame factor. I think she had had me about 30 years before I had, so I was 30 when I had my kid. So I think what had happened with her is she had forgotten a lot about how hard it was. So on one hand, she would say, "Oh my gosh, when you and your brother were little, I was so jealous of my friends who had jobs because they could go eat lunch by themselves." Or she would say, "I was so excited for your dad to get home at the end of the day because I was so tired after watching you and your brother." But at the same time, she would say, "Well, why do you want to hire a babysitter? Don't you want to be with your kid?" And I know, Mom, if you're listening to
Ah.
this, I love you very much. And we've talked about this, and we did have very direct conversations about this, and that improved our relationship. But I think that it took a lot of self-reflection for me and talking with my husband, talking with my friends to kind of realize that, she did forget how hard it was. She had forgotten because certainly it was hard for her too.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that
Yeah.
part up about how sometimes, whether it's a husband, whether it's a mom, a mother-in-law,
Mhm.
a friend, it's so important. And sometimes even your doctor.
Right.
I've had clients who have reached out to their doctors, their OBGYNs for support, and they
Hmm.
were shamed.
Yes.
The
Yes.
doctor, the person they're turning to, was minimizing their experience or saying, "Oh,
Absolutely.
don't worry about it. It'll get better. Just go
Oh,
home and
I
get
heard
some
that so
sleep."
many times.
Did
Yeah.
you? And it's how destructive it
Yeah.
is because I come a lot from an attachment base
Hmm.
where my training was as a Jungian psychologist, but I've really embraced and done a lot of work in the attachment realm. And when we see how important it is when we are working with kids and adults to really
Yes.
attune to the person. Attune, attune, attune. What does
Mm.
that mean? Listen to what the person is saying, whether they're a day old or 100 years old, right? Listen to what the person is saying.
Hmm.
Mirror it back. Empathize.
Right.
Don't judge. Be in tune with that person and
Right.
how, as a mom, we want to do that with our kids. But we
Mm.
also want people attuning to us. We want the OBGYN taking that moment to pause, listen to us and say, "Hey, let's figure this out.
Right.
Let me give you some resources. You're welcome to come back or give me a call or an email if XYZ so that you feel heard, you feel
Hmm.
safe." And I think that that's one of the pieces, often as you're pointing out with your mom, she didn't mean to be harmful,
Right.
but she wasn't attuning to what your issue was.
Right.
You
Yeah.
needed to get out to have a lunch or to reclaim just a tiny
Right.
fraction of your identity. You
Right.
you didn't need to be or want to be shamed about whatever your journey was. And
Right.
that's why it's so important for us, to look at new moms and new dads, because new dads are going through it too.
Hmm.
Often, if their partner is suffering or, you know, uh, whatever gender the other partner is, right? We really want to be able to see, wait, this person is going through something,
Right.
and I don't have to take it on because that will only deplete me, but
Right.
I want to be there for them. I want to help them get the sustenance, the
Right.
sleep, the
Literally
nourishment.
sustenance.
Oh,
Literally
yes.
bringing food. I mean, especially if you're breastfeeding, right? And you're stuck. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's
Oh,
just
it
like
was
stuck.
perfect. Perfect. And thank you for really focusing on that
Right.
piece because a new mom, she may not be eating at all,
Hmm.
or she may not be eating healthfully.
Right.
And because she's too tired to go and make that wonderful
Right.
dinner, she just might be saying, "Oh, okay, I'll have a slice of orange. That's enough." Or
Right.
I'll have a hamburger. That's fine. Not that hamburgers are
Hmm.
bad, but she needs some other things
A
as
lot.
well.
Yeah.
A lot.
And then
And
talk about shame with weight. Also, when you talk about eating, got to talk about, I know some moms are like very urgent about losing that baby weight, even when their bodies are still healing from having a baby.
thank you, Tracy, for bringing that up because it's so important to be looking at this part of weight, where
Hmm.
most women naturally gain a nice, healthy amount of weight
Hmm.
when they're pregnant. Some gain more than that because their
Hmm.
bodies were doing what their bodies needed to do during that pregnancy
Hmm.
journey. And to add that stress on, the stress of losing weight, it's difficult enough for people who struggle with weight issues or just postpartum weight issues. It's difficult enough to be a mom without
Hmm.
having tacked on the stress, which really can be very
Right.
stressful for people to lose weight. And that's one of the pieces we were going to talk about, societal pressures.
Yeah.
And isn't that one of them? Where here, a new mom has a baby, maybe her first, second, third, however many babies, and she comes out of the hospital and she's supposed to come home, be the perfect mom, be
Hmm.
perfectly thin and fit again, and she's supposed to go either right back to work or right back to caregiving for the family, whatever it is,
Hmm.
all without missing a beat. Oh,
Yeah.
and on top of that, she is supposed to, air quotes, be able to show all of these beautifully, perfectly curated images on Facebook and Instagram about being a perfect mom with a perfectly
Right.
clean kitchen and the perfectly fed and joyful baby and the perfectly wonderful partner next to her sharing in the
Right.
journey. That is insanity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's impossible. And it's impossible. Yeah, yeah, and if somebody looks like they're doing it all, I guarantee you that out of that camera frame, their kitchen is a mess, right? So,
And that's
yeah.
so true, Tracy, because the journey of motherhood, when you think about it, it's so imperfect. And we can
Mhm.
always evolve and learn and do it, a little better along the way. But it's the messiness of it.
Mhm.
If we embrace that messiness,
Yeah.
if I had to do it over again, I would have a less clean kitchen, less work productivity,
Right.
and more time,
Yeah.
really reading time, play
Mm.
time with my kids because the kitchen won't know it's cleaned or not.
Right.
The garden won't know if it's tended or not, but those
Right.
babies will know
Mhm.
if they were tended or
Right.
not.
Right. On the flip side, I think there is this huge pressure to enjoy every moment, right? And I'm not really one of those women, but for some women, they cannot enjoy the moment if the kitchen is dirty. And you know what? Like, I think if your kid needs to be crying in the playpen because you cannot mentally handle those dirty dishes, like, I think that's okay. Like, clean the dishes. Your kid needs to learn how to be by themselves for 15 minutes. I think, you know, gosh, it is hard because they do. I mean, now that my kid is 5, I feel like the last 3 years, she's grown so much faster. I think those baby months, it feels like everything moves so slowly. But yeah, it is. It's starting to kind of sink in how fast this is going. But at the same time, it's still allowed, every moment doesn't have to be, can't be enjoyable. I do not enjoy arguing with her about whether she has to go to the bathroom before we leave the house for a long car ride or not. That's not fun. That's not fun for me. um, but yeah, it does go so fast.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to the child in the playpen crying so that you can
Mhm.
clean. Somebody
Yeah.
can clean the kitchen. And absolutely, it's so interesting. I was talking to a psychotherapist who was saying, well, you can never, ever, ever let a child cry,
Mhm.
ever. And I thought, you must not have children. And she doesn't have children
Oh my
because,
gosh.
because there will be times, not that it's certain, where the child, you go up to him, you say, "Hey, mommy loves you. You're going to be in the
Mhm.
playpen. Kiss on the forehead. Mommy's
Mhm.
right here, and mommy's going to spend 10 minutes cleaning the kitchen." And the
Right.
child may have a temper tantrum over that, and they may not, but they will learn. Mommy's here. Mommy sees me.
Right.
Mommy's attuned to me. And in that moment, it may feel really messy.
It's
It
hard. It's hard to do that.
it
That was hard for
abs
me.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. The one of my worst memories as a mom was when I read a book about that said to let your child cry to sleep. And it was so hard for me. It was so
Yeah.
hard. And I have to admit, I have to confess, I rescued the child repeatedly. And that's because it was too stressful for me. But
Right.
parenting is that journey
Yeah.
of figuring out, how can I do this journey, this imperfect, messy, often, as you say, impossible,
Right.
or seemingly impossible and
Right.
difficult journey? How can I do it with love? How can I
Mhm.
do it with sanity in
And love
mind?
for yourself, you know?
100%.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part for I mean, it's the hardest part for me. I think it's the hardest part for a lot of people.
Okay, let's pause right there. I could talk to you for a long time, but I love that you highlighted love for yourself.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's the antidote to shame.
Mm,
I believe that when we're able to come back and say, wait a minute, this moment's difficult. Maybe I'm not doing it perfectly, but you know what? I'm doing in this moment. I'm mindfully doing the best I
Right,
can.
right.
And I love myself enough
Mhm.
to honor what my inner gut is saying right now. And my
Right.
inner gut is saying right now that it's okay for the baby to cry a little bit while I snooze on the couch.
Yeah.
It's
Okay,
okay.
could you ever do that? I never could do that.
I could never do it, but I don't say that I practice everything that I talk about. I'm giving pointers and I'm
Like
hoping
getting
it works.
sleep,
I'm
taking a
hoping it's
shower,
maybe
taking a shower.
maybe it's a
There's a
Mhm.
Have you heard about the phantom cry shower phenomenon that happens with new parents?
No.
As soon as you go in the shower, and I thought this was just me and that I was actually losing my mind. As soon as you go in the shower, you hear the baby cry, but the baby's not crying. You just think you hear the baby cry. And it's something in like the water sound. Anyways, yes. So it was hard work for me to be okay with taking a shower while my baby was
Absolutely. And that
sleeping.
makes sense because of course we're being hyper vigilant. You're a new mom.
Hmm.
Your radar's there 24 hours a
Yeah.
day, even when you're sleeping. That's why we wake up and run to them when
Yeah.
they're and there are so many methods for parenting, so many tips and tricks. And if there was one way to do it, there would only be one book that would speak to everybody. And there isn't one book
No.
because we are
Yeah.
all unique beings. And to me, the journey of motherhood is let's wake up today, do it maybe a little bit better than
Right.
yesterday, maybe a little bit better than my mom did it, but let's do it
Mhm.
mindfully so that I can tend to myself, as you so
Right.
beautifully highlighted, some really good self love, some really good
Mhm.
self care, and then hope that along that journey, there is a partner who's an angel in your life or a sister-in-law
Right.
or a mother, and to be able to see that these people can help lighten the load, that we don't need to carry it
Right.
on our own.
Right.
Oh my goodness, Tracy, I there are many more things to talk about, but I'm so excited for the work that you do, so thrilled with it. And um, I just want to touch on your book that's coming out because I remember we had talked about it, and it's just such a beautiful book because it reminds us that not that everybody is sleeping but the baby. That's such a wonderful, fun book.
Right.
Yet your new book really reminds us how motherhood is a gift, whether we had a perfect or
Mm.
nearly perfect mom or a terribly imperfect mom, that where there was a lot of trauma or something. But when we are most blessed, we can look to that mother or a mother figure in our
Right.
lives. It doesn't
Right.
have to be our bio mom and say, this is a light. This person, this way
Mhm.
of being is a light that I can turn to, even if the person's passed on. It could be a grandmother
Mhm.
that I could turn to and hold that energy, that loving energy inside my
Yeah.
heart and my spirit, and use that energy as a guide during this difficult time. And
Right.
that's the message I personally take away from
Yeah.
your next book. What do you have to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, call your mother. I love how you talk about how the person doesn't even have to be with us. In the end of that book, I'm going to spoil the ending. It's a short book, so that shouldn't be too big of a spoiler. But at the end of the book, the little surprise is that the baby in the beginning of the book is now a new mom, and she's asking her mother, "Well, how did you do it when I was a baby?" And she says, "I would call my mother too." Um, and there's a picture in the illustration of the grandmother looking on from a picture frame. And the book doesn't say whether the grandmother's there or not, but I'm going to tear up.
Mm.
It's a moment that I think is really special because a lot of, babies don't really get to know that would be the great grandma, and they're still making an impact through the love that they gave when their children were young. That love just gets passed on. And I do like to think that, that's still very much there, even if the person is not there anymore. Yes, that's a very special part of that book for me. I had very good relationships. I spent a lot of sleepovers at my grandmother's, and one of them did make it to see my daughter born. I think what is really sad the last couple of years is that because of COVID, a lot of great grandparents weren't able to spend time with their great
Mm.
grandbabies because of quarantine. So I'm hopeful that that is going to be a family role that gets to be more meaningful going forward.
Thank you for pointing that
Yeah,
out and that beautiful part about the image of the grandmother being on the wall, because even for those of us who don't have good memories of a mom or,
yeah,
loving memories or memories of a grandma, sometimes we can find someone. I know
yes.
I have this one aunt where every other word out of her mouth in a very sincere energy was, "Dear one, dear
Oh,
one, my
right.
darling, my dear one, my dear one." And that's how she lived her life. And I will
Mm-hmm.
often hear her voice as a guide
Oh,
saying, "Dear one." And I think
oh,
we can find that if we're
yes,
blessed, we can find those angelic moments, those angelic
yes,
voices, and hold on to them almost as mantras to say,
right,
"Ah, this is beautiful, and this is what I aspire to be in
right.
this part of my life." And even if it's a TV character in a book, we can find
Right.
our inspiration for
Yeah,
being, good enough moms,
right.
loving moms. We can find it. It's
And
out
I
there.
love how you talk about how it doesn't have to be, your biological mom, because not everybody has a relationship with their biological mom. Um, I'm very lucky that I have a great relationship with my biological mom, but I've seen, coaches, teachers, grandmas, aunts, friends of the family, step into some of these roles. And I would also just say that one angel in your life when you're a new mom is not enough. So we need more than one angel. It's what happens when your angel gets sick, or when your
Absolutely.
angel needs help, and I think talking about how, I had never changed a diaper. Our society has moved away from these multi-generational, very close-knit communities to everybody's in their own little apartment or their own little house, and we don't help each other take care of our babies or each other as much as culture once did. So it's hard to build that. It's hard to build that.
Absolutely. That we
Yeah,
had families living in multi-generational
right,
households for thousands and
right.
thousands and thousands of years. And now in the last 100 years, it has really
Hmm.
shifted, and certainly in the last, you know, 50 years. And
Yes,
we're still trying to figure it out.
yes.
And it's such an imperfect figuring out process. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm truly grateful and delighted and honored to spend time with you. Where can our listeners find you?
My website is tracycgold.com. That's C like cat for my middle initial, C. My middle name is Claire, not Cat, though. That would be very fun. I'm on Facebook at Tracy C. Gold author and on Instagram at Tracy C. Gold.
Beautiful. And the spelling on Tracy's name is Tracy. Last name Gold. Thanks again, Tracy. It's been such a joy.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.